so I was asked to talk about analytics, kind of taking the live ops perspective on this, and I think I have a lot of things for 15 minutes, so let's try to see how it goes. So a bit about me and my how can I change the slides here? Now I got it. Yeah. So my gaming industry experience is about 5 years long. So I started at EA Helsinki working with SimCity Build It, and now I've been close to 2 years now the lead data analyst at Small Giant Games, having worked with of course Empires and Puzzles, as well as Puzzle Combat, which is our soft launch title. I was pretty lucky during my time at EA. I also got to collaborate with a lot of great folks from PopCap, Fire Monkeys, and all those great EA teams. But really, I think like the reason why I might be talking here is, for example, so I'm working with Small Giant Games, and one thing that happened last year was we won the Pocket Gamer Best Live Ops Award for 2020. And this is actually interesting in the sense that we don't really have a dedicated live ops team. Most Small Giants work with live ops in one way or another, and even the analytics team is tiny compared to the most other studios. But I'm in that sense we do some things actually quite differently from others. But hopefully you can kind of get some ideas from this as well. So because everyone is working with live ops, everyone also has access to our homegrown reporting and analytics toolset. And really the main use case for data and analytics for us is to have really create these data-informed discussions around design, marketing, and finance. I think we're quite different from many other free-to-play studios in that we actually don't do a lot of things, a lot of A/B testing. We don't really do segmented targeting. On the game side, like obviously user acquisition is a different beast, but like coming into these conferences, I see a lot of talks about analytics focusing. The analytics talks focus on topics like A/B testing, advanced A/B testing methodologies, segmentation, and so on. However, I think there are some kind of foundational topics that are talked less about, and yet they are important for live ops games and really help to create the ideas on what should we improve and test in the first place. So what is live ops? I guess in terms of this talk, I'm just talking about keeping the players engaged by continuously adding new content, new features, running events, running offers, and really just iterating and improving on the existing gameplay. I tried to divide the talk into kind of three quick parts. So first of all, what does the game team need from analytics when it comes to live ops? Looking into the game more specifically, how is it working? And then kind of going into really to the players and what is it in the game that they value. So let's start with the first part. What does the game team need from analytics? I think there's two kind of the most important parts are data that is timely and especially correct, and really what can you do when you're releasing these features out maybe every month, and of course on before you go live you don't really have the data, so what do you do in that case? The first one is data that is correct, and it's mainly about is your reporting reliable? So let's say you like during a live ops, you move so fast, you can have errors in the tracking or the data collection, you can have errors in the processing, you can especially have players who have hacked the clients and sending this all really weird data about the game economy and stuff. And really what you do not want to do is having your marketing and finance teams making decisions based on faulty data. And also, of course, as an analyst, and especially for us, because we don't really have a lot of folks working with analytics, the more time you spend on analyzing anomalies in the data, the less time you're actually providing valuable insights for the team. And not to mention, building any kind of automation or prediction modeling on top of all the data is just a disaster waiting to happen. So getting the foundations of data quality right, I think, is extremely important, and we should discuss more about that. So one way we deal with this at Small Giant Games is that we actually have most of the tracking, it comes from the server. So this way we're less prone to, for example, the hacked clients and the faulty data that comes from those players. But I think another important part with the server-side tracking is that, let's say you're running a live ops game and you basically have an issue. For example, the players can't, I don't know, log in or whatnot. But for some reason, you're not tracking the correct part of the game that could help you inform the decision on what should we do about this. And so instead of doing the client update dance, which kind of can take days in the worst case, it's usually a lot faster to change the tracking or add tracking on the server side. But that really is like what to do when you're live with the feature and you can actually collect data. What do you do when a feature is not out yet? So then there's probably a lot of tons of things you can do, but the one thing I'm more familiar with is simulating data for designers and other people in the team. So for example, you can think about simulating long-term reward distributions in the game. And kind of once you have that data, it can act as a benchmark against live data once you go live with the feature and verify that everything is acting as kind of planned, as designed, basically. And I think it's really important to build some kind of simulation/testing framework for any random game components already during the soft launch of the game. And I guess like the more randomness you have in the game, the more the players will actually have doubts. So it really helps to have multiple checks in place that everything is working. And it's important to keep the players' trust on this. Of course, simulation can also be used for things like progression analysis, estimating the difficulty, and so on. But again, kind of trying to take the live ops perspective here, I think it's important that you do not build the simulations in a vacuum. You need to take into account that there are live ops components like offers in the game that will have significant impact on progression, for example. And I personally made this error and tried to learn from that. So then going forward, looking into like how is the game working, and of course, like the most important parts are the economy and how is it working. Like how are the currencies? Are you seeing inflation? How many players have reached the end of content? Are your crafting components coming up as you're supposed to, or are there inventories that are piling up? And of course, the changes that you're making. You're introducing new features, offers, and balance changes. How do all these affect player currency wallets, for example, spending habits, and so on? And I really think like the important part here is having focus or creating focus. So you probably all know the Pareto principle, but it's not really wrong to say that like in high level, you can think like 80% of hard currency spent goes into 20% of sinks. 80% of complaints, player complaints come from 20% of game features. And really the key is finding the focus areas, finding the levers that will make a difference when you improve and change them during the kind of live ops phase. Another thing is feedback, and I have an example here from our game. Obviously, we're running a puzzle RPG. We have heroes. They go to battle. They have win rates. And the example here is that we basically had multiple heroes that we changed at the same time. And you can see here the other buff actually made a good impact on the win rate of that particular hero, whereas the other one didn't change at all. So these kinds of things can be really good feedback to the designers to better understand what are the levers that will actually create impact that the players will notice, and then what are kind of changes that will not create such a big impact. So this is another key point for live ops. It's a better understanding of the impact of the changes that you make allows the team to do more with less iterations. So then going on, what do the players value? For example, this can be topics like what content resonates with players, what offers are working or are not working. Can you spot specific content or price points that might be problematic? And it's especially important to contrast this actual player behavior data to the community sentiment that you're seeing, for example, on Facebook or your forums or wherever you're having those discussions. So trying to come up with some examples. Again, we're running puzzle RPG. We have heroes, and for us, the heroes have these special skills that range in speed from very slow to very fast. So I had this graph where basically we're just plotting win rate versus hero use rate. And the red dots here are the kind of the faster heroes, and the green dots are the slower heroes. And you can kind of looking at the trend, you can see that overall players have a pretty good grasp of hero performance, but they have a tendency to undervalue particular slower heroes. Kind of, you can see there's a group of heroes there that are actually in this game mode have basically the best win rates in the game, but they're not really used all that much. So creating these kinds of insights can help the designers create content that the players will value more, and of course be willing to buy that. But also I think this kind of data is very valuable for example, community management, and we've seen that it really helps them engage and excite the players and have discussions around this kind of data. The one more example I have is against on price point bias. So one thing we found, for example, was that the 490 yen price point was performing significantly. Actually, I think this was like the $3 price point, but just locally it's 490, and it was performing significantly worse in Japan than globally. And kind of looking into this, I noticed that 4 and actually 9 as well are both considered kind of unlucky numbers in Japan. And so this particular price point combines kind of both, which then reduces apparently its desirability no matter what the actual content in the offers is. And really understanding player preferences, player biases are these kind of, you can use this as tactical tools that you can leverage in the design, again, to create content and offers that the players will value more. And in some sense, one of the aims for live ops is that when you have the correct focus and you understand player behavior and you understand the impact that your changes will make, that will really help you. And even if you're running, for example, A/B tests, it becomes less important what kind of A/B test methodology you use for the analysis, because you should basically see the impact coming a mile away if you have this correct. So going into the summary, I kind of touched on 3 points. So first of all, data quality. Once you have that correct, you're definitely going to spend less time analyzing invalid data, and really the main point is maintaining trust for the game team, that when they go and see the reports and make decisions based on the numbers, they know that they can trust that everything is working as expected. And for us, one of the key things that we're doing is using server validated data to on this point. Another part was controlling the economy and balance. And really the key points are finding the areas on where you should focus the effort, giving feedback to designers, and really giving the game team opportunities to create more impact with less iterations. And then understanding player biases, understanding the preferences, and really just creating content that the players will value and allow you to price that content according to their preferences. And the final point I hope to make is that even though kind of I've discussed these as separate topics, optimizing on looking at specific metrics on the economy or wherever, it's really important to have kind of a holistic look on the numbers when you try to optimize the numbers individually, because a lot of the time the KPIs are kind of pulling rope, so you can kind of easily move one thing up but then move another thing down, and really it's extremely important to take a holistic look when you try to optimize these things. That's really all I had. Hopefully just 15 minutes, so any questions I would be happy to answer.
That was perfect timing. I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
And actually, I mean, I think what you're trying to get across here. I think the idea of actually thinking about how you look under the data to find the causes of whatever you're trying to investigate. You know, that 490 yen thing. I knew about 4. I kind of think I remember 9 being an issue, but it wouldn't have occurred to me to think about Japanese pricing at that point being a problem. And the fact that you kind of like can look under the data, you can kind of get beyond it. I think it's actually quite a kind of cool thing. We have a bunch of questions for you. You'll be glad to hear. First one is from Sai Pranith Ganuti. I'm going to probably be terribly chastised for pronouncing that wrong, but hopefully I didn't do too bad. How do you identify events to send to Google or Facebook for better UA?
For better UA?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Well, as always, like coming from the analyst, the first thing you do is actually you talk to the UA team and try to figure out what do they already know. Leverage the understanding that they definitely have on their topic on UA, and then build on top of that and kind of interview them. What are things that we're not sending yet? What are things that we can try? And then kind of finally, like after you've exhausted all that knowledge, then you go out on your own and try to build methods on how do we expand the things that we're not sending yet.
And Hynninen is saying, do you build your own A/B testing tools, or do you use a third-party tool?
We have our own tools. Yeah.
Cool. So why use your own rather than something external in that case?
I think historically we found that like there's a lot of good tools out there, but for our particular use cases, we always need something extra. And over time, it has been easier just to build one that we basically know that works for us, and of course also in some sense also gives us a bit of competitive advantage.
Yeah, I mean, so things I've been sort of investigating is configurations within the back end to effectively deliver an A/B test without having to go through a lot of the processes. If your data model is robust enough, that theoretically should help. But I suppose a tool is not much more than that. But anyway, it's just different mindsets, isn't it? So next up, how close does your team work with the UA team? Are they separate? You know, so do you have analytics guys over there and you have UA guys over there, or are they kind of more connected?
Organizationally, they are different. And of course, like, but the thing is, the UA folks are constantly looking into the data, so it's not like it's on us. Definitely, like the UA team is very, very, very much on top of the data, and a lot of in that sense, we are mostly providing tools. Of course, if needed, we can definitely pitch in and help and look at kind of on a more granular level when the tools are not kind of. It's kind of obviously it's impossible to have everything on the reporting stack. So once we go, we can definitely do a deep dive. But really, UA team is also very knowledgeable about understanding the numbers themselves.
Yeah, I mean, lots of teams do it differently, don't they? I mean, I kind of like, because I've traditionally been a product owner, I've had responsibility both in terms of user base and also kind of gameplay experience, or at least experience in general, depending on the project. And so it was quite good having the analytics folks working directly with me. But I've seen other teams that work very effectively by having, a separate team that they're called on to answer specific questions. And I think why that's interesting is because if you're being asked a set of questions from a game design team, they're coming from a different angle than the guys who are asking from a UA point of view. And they may end up needing some similar insight. And you kind of need both mindsets to be able to uncover the depth of what the real problem is or what the real opportunity is that may be hidden in the numbers. At least that's my feeling. Cool. Thank you, Mark. And how do you suggest to do initial design level of difficulty curve and to improve the progression in live ops?
Can you repeat that?
So the question is, how do you suggest to do the initial design of level difficulty curve, and how to improve it? How to improve the progression in live ops? I think what he's trying to say is basically, where do you start in terms of working out your level design, your level difficulty, and how do you deal with that as the life cycle of the game continues, and you need to have the progression of the player over an extended period, with events punctuating the activity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we obviously have designers who would be way more capable to answer these questions. But I guess like two things that we try to do is, first of all, having the difficulty set up so that it's easily tunable by as little manual changes as possible. So if possible, you could basically tune it just by changing one single parameter. Then again, of course, the first pass that you should do is just like play the hell out of it, see how it feels, and then go from there.
And I think that for me is what has traditionally been my way, which is basically I make a gut feel of it, and I mock it up, and then I play it through either myself or with lots of other users, and slowly but surely increase the number of users I give access to it. But recently I've got more into the whole use of Monte Carlo simulations, which I still don't quite understand, but I have a guy who does, and so that has made a lot of difference, because it allows you to see where you've got positive or negative feedback loops in the process that can disproportionately send resources or power-ups or whatever it else, the rewards that come through play, can unbalance the difficulty curve dramatically, and you may not notice that when you're doing it manually. So to me,
I mean, obviously, like just having a simulation on top of it will give you basically the range of outcomes, whereas kind of when you play it by yourself, you're kind of having a very particular segment of players that are very knowledgeable about how they will proceed and kind of what is the range of outcomes. But the simulation will kind of give you a wider picture about
pushes the boundaries a lot more, doesn't it? Yeah, exactly. And moving on from that, to slightly similar, do you use machine learning, and if so, for what purpose?
I hesitate to say that we use machine learning, because we do very simple. We actually like try to keep our models as simple as possible. But having said that, I think they work extremely well for our case. So we kind of managed to find a nice point where it's kind of just simple enough, but still works for us. And mainly we basically do well, of course, like I think our main use case is user acquisition for prediction models.
Yeah, I was very lucky because I knew Demis of DeepMind before they were being bought. I was doing some work with them on a game which never got released because they got bought and other things became more priority. But it was really eye-opening, the guys that they had working, thinking about how machine learning can affect game design. Really just fascinating, and the fact that we can, like I say, machine learning is so many different ways of looking at it. AI is so many different ways of looking at it. They're really just coding solutions to problems, and so whether it's a simple solution because it's manageable, or whether you're creating a whole entity that can play the game without instruction, that's a different feat. I think most of us aren't going to be able to do the latter. But maybe some of us can use the former to create, exercises and really test our own assumptions.
Yeah, definitely agree.
How do you track sources and sinks in-game currency? Do you use your own or an industry standard tool for that? And would you also be prepared to share the analytics tools that you use?
So again, we're basically running pretty much everything on custom analytics and custom collection. Yeah. So we're basically not using a lot of the third-party tools out there. And again, we're basically collecting pretty much what the data that the game uses on the server side. So we try to keep again the collection. We start with the simple things, collecting what the game has, and then try to enrich it if we find out that we need something else.
So presumably you're doing things like you have an event trigger. The event trigger delivers, some name value pair combinations that define what's happening in that. You may have some reference data, so you don't have to post that every time, but you can produce a picture. classic heat map stuff or other framework type stuff. I mean, I say this out loud because I think it's quite often that people don't talk about the detail of that. I have a particular interest in a method called HACCP, Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points, which is a method that Pillsbury and NASA developed to make sure they didn't poison the Apollo astronauts. Because you can't break a package up. You've got to make sure that the package you send up to the, in the Apollo 11, was going to be openable and was going to be safe. So how do you make sure the thing is safe? Because you can't test it. So what they did is they look at what their expected behavior is, what acceptable was, and they look for variations on that throughout the whole process. And I think if you apply that mindset to games, it allows you to really think about what do you expect behavior to be in your game? What are the ways we can measure that effectively? And then use that to create patterns and funnels that allow us to see what's the best way to improve the experience of the game in general.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think like so many things can be thought of as funnels, and like they are extremely, like it is actually surprisingly easy to, like if you have a problem, you will spot that in a funnel. So like just creating analytics funnels or event funnels for anything that you can be very, very helpful.
It's just a shorthand way of getting people who are not data literate to understand what's going on pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah, and I'm pinpointing like this is where the problem is.
Yeah, exactly. Or at least where the problem is exhibiting itself. One problem I had a game where people were failing at a particular level, but it was actually the previous 2 levels where they'd missed something. And I could see it in the funnel where it was happening that they were failing and dropping out of the game. But it took quite a lot of digging to work out what it was that led them to having that problem. Yeah,
that's a good example.
Yeah. So next up, do you A/B test price points for IAPs?
Not really. Like we actually like on price points we try to show the same offers for all the players.
I mean, it just why wouldn't you A/B test? I've got the thoughts, but I'd love to know what you think in terms of why do you not decide to do that?
Mainly because the game is PvP oriented, and we have a very active community that would just raise hell if they noticed that we would A/B test these things. I think it's way more helpful just to keep things straight for the players and kind of show everything to all players.
But isn't there an opportunity, particularly if you had, say, consumables in a game, where you can offer price value bundles on limited offers that would not necessarily break that? I can completely get when you're talking about kind of character shifting stuff. That's a different beast, and particularly you want to make sure you've got a level playing field. But potentially, couldn't you deal with that with the ELO style rating of the player versus other players?
Maybe, but again, like another way just to do it is basically having variety in the offers themselves and just letting players choose what they want.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the problem with my logical argument is that like you said earlier, there's actually an emotional response from a lot of players to the very idea of what is perceived as pay to win. Even if it's not necessarily real, the perception of it is quite daunting, shall we say.
Yeah.
So next up, we have so many questions. I hope you're okay with this. Actually, I think we'll have to make this the last one because we're just about to run out of time. What are the important high-level KPIs that you focus on to improve live ops?
For us, it is mainly, well, the first, of course, is retention. And like, especially for RPGs, the one thing that you want to have is that long tail of retention. And that really has been, I think, a significant driver for the success of our game. Then other thing is conversion, in the sense that, like, if you can, well, of course, first of all, if you have players that are willing to spend some money on the game, they are more likely to stay as well. But then there's I hope I discussed this, that there's kind of this rope pulling between the numbers, and sometimes like you can basically increase conversion, but you might decrease the ARPU. But if you're getting the same amount of money from a wider use base, I think it will always create a healthier game in terms of long-term monetization, long-term sustainability for the game. So I like it's not that it's basic stuff and but it depends on the game and the genre. And
I think that's the answer to all of it, isn't it? It's like,
yeah.
It's fine. I think we had another question as well asking about, is there a minimum viable analytics? I mean, it's basically finding what is the most effective thing that you can measure to set yourself goals, and then over time increase the complexity. Because in the early days, we may not have critical mass in terms of the data significance. So
Yeah.
we have to just do the best we can until we can get to the point where we can actually ask more detailed, refined questions.
Yeah, and that's again because like retention and conversion as the kind of binomial metrics have way less variation than other kind of ARPU and these kind of continuous numbers.
Absolutely. And on that note, thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you.